How about Jorge Sedano,
How about it?
ESPN LA, as well as we get ready for this. There's no problem with familiarity in this series, is there, George? Great to have you, man. How you doing?
Good to be here, guys. Yeah, no question about it. Obviously, LeBron and your team certainly have been at it a bunch of times historically. And you know what? I think that, these relationships have actually spawned over the years, right? Draymond and LeBron are tight. And him and Steph have a lot of respect towards each other, despite some of the tension, I guess, back in those days during the championship runs. It's pretty interesting to see as things have developed.
Yeah, things have developed, not quickly in terms of Lakers versus Warriors. It will have been 33 years since they clashed, but just the familiarity of LeBron versus Steph, and I know that's oversimplifying this matchup, but how much impact does that have nationally as opposed to any other series going on right now?
I would just say that if we're ranking, if this was like some sort of contest, I don't think there's any question what would be the number one series. I think if you're the NBA, if you could reproduce this series over and over and over again and just get rid of conferences, you'd have this series on as many times as you could. And you'd maybe just be like, you know what? It doesn't matter if they lose. Let's make a double elimination and get them back in there and face each other in the finals. So this is definitely the series to watch. I don't think there's any doubt.
George, you know what's interesting with at least tonight is you have the Lakers who had to deal with the loud Grizzlies and Dillon Brooks. The Warriors dealt with the uniqueness of the geographic rivalry here, Sacramento and the Bay. A lot of emotion went into both series. What does each team have left in that department for this one, which is where the traditional emotion is reserved?
Oh, I'm not really worried about that. I think ultimately because it's these two, because these guys know each other the way they know each other, and because everyone in the world wants to see it, they're going to be up for the game. I'm not worried about that part of it, especially with the Lakers, particularly because that series ended on Friday. I mean, there's been a lot of time for them to rest up and kind of focus. If anything, I think potentially if we were looking at the Warriors, maybe that would be something that could creep in, but I don't believe it. I mean, these guys, as you know, are champions. They know how to handle these situations. I'm not really worried about that. When I look at this series, I think there are a couple of things that I think are challenges. Obviously, if you're the Warriors, I'd be more worried about Anthony Davis than I would be essentially whatever happened in the last series.
What's the story with Anthony Davis? Mark and I were looking at his game log, and it's 33, 12, 31, 12. Why can't Anthony Davis play game to game like the player that we all think that he is?
It's a great question. I would say that in the last series, it has less to do with Anthony Davis, and I kind of tipped my cap to the Defensive Player of the Year in Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Like, I think we just kind of omit the fact that, or just overlook the fact that guy's really good too, particularly on defense. And he was the guy who was primarily equipped to stop Anthony Davis, or at least slow him down. And I think Anthony Davis is a much better player than him offensively. Jaren Jackson Jr. defensively is great, as I mentioned. Offensively, he's still got some ways to round out and to form. But I think that he had his hands full with a guy who's really freaking good. Now, there has been some inconsistency with Anthony Davis historically, but I think a lot of that is really more due to injury, less about ability.
Jorge Sedano, ESPN LA, is with us here on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. We're getting ready for Game 1 tonight. George, give everybody a sense, at least through your eyes, how different are the Lakers post-trade deadline?
Oh, I think both teams are way different, okay? I mean, let's start with the obvious with the Lakers to your question. I mean, the previous team that they had around LeBron and AD made 0 sense. I would say that the two previous off seasons for the Lakers made 0 sense on how to build a team around LeBron and Anthony Davis. The trade deadline, now this team looks like a team you build around LeBron and Anthony Davis. They've got guys that can defend, they got guys that can shoot, and they've got one or two guys that can put it on the deck when those guys are not in the game for one reason or another. That wasn't the case previously. They weren't a very good defensive team. They were okay, I would say above average, but not elite like they are now. and then they had very little shooting on that particular team. But as I look at the Warriors, too, you guys know this. Andrew Wiggins missed for, what was it, a month, maybe longer? I don't know. He missed a ton of time. You get GP2 back. Yeah, 2 months. There you go. You get GP2 back in the mix. I think these teams look very different right now than they did even when they faced off against each other during the regular season. And even in those games, you didn't really see the teams at full strength very much.
Austin Reaves, how do you explain the player that he's become virtually out of nowhere, and now he seems at times to be the Lakers' best player?
Look, man, I think that it's a testament to the NBA and the G League in particular that teams have an outlet to be able to kind of hone players' skills and craft what they're supposed to be at the big club. And I think a lot of these teams at the G League level, they run the same offenses that the big parent club does. And I think he spent some time down there. And last year was kind of back and forth a little bit, but played there, with the big club mostly. But he spent some time down there early on, particularly I think helped him. And then I think playing with LeBron helped him. LeBron immediately put his arms around him because he's a really smart player. Like, he's a really bright kid. And he's got a little bit of everything to his game. I think the one thing he was lacking last season was the ability to shoot. But what we've seen in the NBA, guys, as you know, that's a trait that, for the most part, if you're a perimeter player, if you struggle shooting the ball, there's so many guys in this league that have been helped by shooting coaches and things of that nature. And these teams have done a phenomenal job over the years because there's such an emphasis on shooting, basically because of the Warriors and their dominance over the years, that these guys can be developed to be better shooters. So he already had the wiggle to his game offensively, and he was already a good defensive player. He's a lot longer than you think he is. His wingspan is pretty damn good for a player his size. So he moves his feet very well. So he's a good player. And I just think that what happens is you get the combination of being able to mine the talent a little bit, right? And then working him through the kinks in a year last year that was lost, I think allowed him to have that confidence. And then LeBron instills that confidence in him too.
George, I know LA does not want to have this conversation, but unfortunately for LA, it's time to have this conversation. You go out in the streets of LA and say, who's the best point guard of all time? Everybody thinks, well, that's a stupid question. We all know that answer. The world is no longer really seeing that as an easy answer. So this Steph and Magic thing, though obviously different eras and different players, how does that conversation resonate down there?
Oh, people here are not happy with it, but I'm with you. I think that's a real conversation, right? But listen, I'm used to ruffling feathers. I've been here 7 years, and I tell people things they don't want to hear necessarily, and that has endeared me in some ways. And to some people, they listen because they want to hear what I have to say to criticize their teams, right? I think that it kind of works both ways for me in that regard. But I think it's a lot closer than people think. Look, if I was really breaking it down, Steph is a very good passer. Magic might be the best passer I've ever seen, right? And I'm old enough to have watched him play at 45 years old. Obviously, Steph, a much more well-rounded offensive player because of his shooting abilities, the greatest shooter of all time. Defensively, neither guy was great. I think Steph has become much better later in his career. I think Magic's size obviously helped him, and I would probably give him a slight edge in that department. But I think we're splitting hairs between those two, not to give you a cop-out answer, but I'm with you if you're trying to imply that it's close, because I do think it's close.
Yeah, I think they're totally different players, but if you want to compare them, I think it is closer and getting closer and closer with every passing series. Is the key to the series a player who's not a player at all, but rather the coaching matchup, George?
Okay, so there are a number of things that I'm looking at here, and that's certainly one of them. Obviously, for the Lakers, the Steph conundrum. Who guards Steph, right? Because if you put Vanderbilt on him, Steph's going to get him in foul trouble, even as good as he is defensively, right? And he's probably going to do that to almost anyone. So you're just going to have to throw a lot of different guys at Steph and just hope that he has one of those off nights that he rarely has, right? But I think that, and obviously Anthony Davis is the conundrum for the Warriors because they don't have an obvious matchup for him and his athleticism at that size. To me, this series boils down to a couple of things. Wiggins-LeBron matchup, I think, is one. And I think Russell versus whoever, right? Because he's not a good defender, as you guys well know. The Warriors know him really well. He's got the pressure of a contract year coming up right now, facing a team that knows him really well, that also knows he can't defend. I don't think there's a clear matchup for them to put him on defensively, and I'm curious to see what they throw at him offensively when he's got the ball in his hands, because he's had some up and down moments certainly as well during the postseason. He doesn't have a ton of postseason experience either. But the coaching matchup to me is big. Look, I like Darvin Ham. He's going to eventually be a good coach. I don't think that he's in the same class as Steve Kerr by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that there has already been rookie mistakes this season during the regular season and even during the postseason. And I think that is a huge mismatch in this series. And when I think the talent is close, I start looking at the coaching and the differences there, and that's usually the direction that I like to lean in.
Okay, it feels like, without going deep into a prediction world, it feels like you think the Warriors have a slight edge in the series. Am I right?
Yes, I do think they have a slight edge, and I think the coaching puts that slightly over the top. I think the talent is fairly even when you look at it across the board, because yes, they have Andrew Wiggins now and GP, and I think they've done, they're trying to get those guys back up to speed very quickly, and it's hard to do that when they didn't play much, if at all, during the regular season for you, or hadn't played recently, and then throw them into a playoff series that's supercharged, where it's an 80-minute drive, and you got a team that's running up and down the floor at, a breakneck pace. So, but this series will be different. I think the Warriors, one of their challenges, I think, is as great as those three guys are, Dre, Steph, and Clay. I've talked to Warriors people over the years that despite their greatness, occasionally they cough it up a little too much and give the other team some easy ones. I don't think you can do that with the Lakers, but I will say this. If the Lakers turn the ball over, their only real kryptonite on defense is they are not good in transition. And that is a place I feel like the Warriors could excel. I'm curious to see what Steve unveils. Could we see more Jonathan Kuminga in this series? Because I could see the Lakers on offense particularly not respecting that. And Kuminga, look, he's still a young kid, but I've seen some games. Look, I did a game, I want to say, maybe it was last season, I did a game where Kuminga hit like 3 threes in a game where LeBron had like 50-something points. Might have been last season, if I recall correctly. But he certainly he's capable of having a flash here or there, and he's got raw skills still. So I am curious to see how this thing unfolds and what wrinkles Steve throws out here. Because I feel like the Lakers, they were slow to make adjustments in that last series. Now, it worked because they were the better team, especially without Adams and Clark in that series to help defend Anthony Davis. But I don't think that's necessarily the case here. I think that the talent is fairly even.
Yeah, this is a series for maturity. That's the way that I would say it. After the two series,
rated R or NC-17?
No, this is rated R.
Okay,
it's only round 2.
Okay,
let's calm down.
Yeah.
George, thanks, man. Great stuff. Great to have you.
Guys, anytime. Take care.